There is a sound a crowd makes when a fight starts. You have heard it, a sharp collective intake of breath, and then a low roar, and then every head in the room turns the same direction at once. You turn too. You do not decide to. Maybe you are embarrassed about it afterward. You did not want to see it. You do not enjoy violence. You tell yourself you are not the kind of person who watches. And yet your body turned before you had a vote. You call it morbid curiosity. Rubbernecking. A small ugliness in you that you would rather not examine. But the real answer is far stranger. You were not watching a fight. You were reading a document. And the thing that pulled your head around has been keeping your ancestors alive for longer than your species has had a name. Let me show you what you were actually doing. Think about what a fight is, stripped of the drama. It is information. It is the single richest data source your ancestors ever had access to, delivered in about 8 seconds. Who is stronger than who? Who backed down? Who stepped in to help, and who stayed still? Who has allies, and how many? Who is now humiliated and will be dangerous later? Who is now dominant and should be deferred to tomorrow morning? For a social primate, that information was not entertainment. It was the difference between eating and starving, between belonging and exile, between living and not. So ask yourself, if a creature could learn all of that by looking without ever risking a scratch, what would evolution do to that creature's attention? It would nail it to the fight. A primatologist named Franz de Waal spent decades watching chimpanzees at Arnhem Zoo, and he noticed something that reframed how we think about conflict. The chimps did not just fight, they watched fights, intently. Bystanders would stop what they were doing, climb for a better view, and track every exchange. And they were not passive. After the fight ended, they acted on what they had seen. They shifted their alliances, they groomed the winner. They avoided the loser or comforted him depending on where they stood. De Waal's great insight was that the fight was only half the story. The watching was the other half. Chimpanzee politics was not decided by who could win a fight. It was decided by who had been paying attention. Do you see it yet? The spectator was not a bystander. The spectator was a player. Now come back to your own head, because there is machinery in there dedicated to this. Your brain contains a system that neuroscientists call conflict monitoring. It runs largely in a region called the anterior cingulate cortex, which sits deep in the middle of your brain, and its job is to detect when things do not fit, when two options clash, when something is wrong, when there is a discrepancy in the world that needs sorting out. A psychologist named Matthew Botvinnik helped map how this works, and the picture that emerged is unsettling in its simplicity. The system is not a thinker. It is an alarm. It does not weigh whether a conflict is worth your time, or whether you have better things to do, or whether you will regret the next 20 minutes. It detects clash, and it demands resources, and your attention arrives whether or not you sent it. You have felt this system fire in ordinary ways. It is what snags you when a word is spelled wrong on a sign. It is what makes a picture hanging slightly crooked impossible to ignore. Something does not fit, and a part of you that never sleeps raises its hand. Now scale that from a crooked picture to two humans trying to hurt each other. It is fast, it is automatic, and you have no switch for it. And here is what matters. That system does not politely ask your conscious mind whether now is a good time. It simply grabs your attention and points it. By the time you have decided that you are not the kind of person who watches, your eyes have already been aimed for you. That is why the turning feels involuntary. It is involuntary. The decision was made in a room you do not have the keys to. But there is a second layer, and it is the one that explains why you cannot look away once you have started. Watching a fight is not just about who wins. It is about learning without bleeding. A psychologist named Albert Bandura demonstrated something in the 1960s that unsettled a great deal of received wisdom. He showed children a film of an adult attacking an inflatable doll. Then he put those children in a room with the same doll. They did what they had seen. They struck it the same way, with the same movements, sometimes with the same words. Nobody rewarded them. Nobody instructed them. They had simply watched, and the watching had installed the behavior. Bandura called this observational learning, and the idea underneath it is enormous. You do not have to make a mistake to learn from it. You can outsource the mistake to someone else, watch it happen, and keep the lesson. Consider how much that is worth. Every other animal learns the hard way. It touches the thing, and the thing hurts, and if it survives, it knows better. The price of every lesson is paid in blood. A creature that can learn by watching has broken that rule. It can collect 100 lessons it never paid for. It can know what a fall costs without falling, what a predator does without being caught, what happens to the one who challenges the wrong person without ever being that one. That is not a minor upgrade. That is arguably the trick that built human culture, and watching is the mechanism it runs on. Now apply that to a fight. Two people are testing, in real time and at real cost, what happens when you push. What works, what does not. Who is bluffing. What a real threat looks like versus a performed one. That is a lesson your ancestors would have paid enormously for, and it is being handed to you for free, and all you have to do is not look away. So you do not look away. And this is where it stops being about fists. Because that same machinery does not know what year it is. Open your phone right now and look at what it shows you. Two people arguing under a post. A public figure being taken apart in a thread. A stranger being humiliated in a video you did not search for. A comment section that has turned into a brawl. Your ancient conflict detector looks at that and recognizes it instantly. A dominance contest. A status challenge. Two members of your group testing each other in public. It has no concept of the fact that these are strangers, that the outcome will never touch your life, that you will never meet either of them, that they may not even be real, that the entire fight may have been manufactured to make you look at it. The detector does not care. It sees conflict, and it does what it has always done. It turns your head. An entire industry now runs on this. Not because someone discovered something new about you, but because someone discovered something very old about you and pointed it at a screen. Think about what that means. The thing that once made your ancestors smart is now the thing that makes you scroll. And consider the exchange rate. Your ancestor watched one fight, and the information was priceless, and then it ended. The crowd dispersed. There was nothing more to watch, because a village only contains so many people, and only so much can happen in a day. The instinct was expensive to trigger, and it paid for itself every time. Now the supply is infinite. There is always another argument, always another stranger being destroyed, always a fresh contest, one thumb flick away. The same instinct that once fired a handful of times a year can now fire 1,000 times before lunch, and every single firing feels exactly as urgent as the one that once told your ancestor who to fear. Your detector was calibrated for scarcity. It is now drinking from a fire hose, and it cannot tell that the water has stopped being water. And notice, too, what the detector chooses to grab you with. Not the peaceful thread, not the two people quietly agreeing. Conflict. Threat. The status contest. Because for 100,000 years, that was the only information urgent enough to interrupt what you were doing. Peace was never worth the interruption. Peace meant nothing had changed. So now you understand the shame you felt when your head turned. It was not a small ugliness in you. It was not proof that some part of you enjoys cruelty. It was one of the oldest and most useful instincts your species owns, doing precisely what it was built to do, in a world that has learned to feed it garbage. Which raises the only question that matters. If you cannot switch it off, what can you do with it? You can notice it. That is not a small thing. The instinct is automatic, but what happens after it fires is not. Your head will turn every time, and there is no version of you that stops that. But between the turning and the 20 minutes of scrolling that follows, there is a gap. That gap is yours. You can ask what the fight is actually teaching you. Your ancestor learned who to trust and who to avoid, and the lesson mattered because the people mattered. A stranger being torn apart online teaches you nothing about anyone you will ever meet. The machinery is running. The data is worthless. And that is the test, if you want one. Not whether the fight is interesting, because it will always be interesting. That is what it was built to be. The test is whether you will ever stand in a room with either of them. Whether the outcome changes a single thing about the people you actually have. If the answer is no, then your oldest instinct is being spent on nothing by someone who is being paid for it. That recognition is enough, not to stop the turn, but to end it a little sooner. There is a sound a crowd makes when a fight starts. Your head turns before you decide to, and it always will. But that turn is not a flaw in you. It is 100,000 years of ancestors leaning in to learn something that might save their lives, still leaning, still learning, in a world with nothing left to teach them.